Good morning. Happy Monday. Okay, Olé, you got to come up here. Look at these good-looking people. Okay, let's pretend like we're celebrating something. Everybody, woo! There we go. That's how we want to start a Monday. Thank you all so much for being here. This is an incredibly exciting morning for us at Lancaster History. For those of you who I don't know, I'm Robin Surratt, Vice President of Lancaster History. I've been on this team for 17 years, and we've been planning, thinking about, and working towards the Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith Center for History and Democracy for 14 of those years. So I'm really excited to be at this moment today. While I was thinking about what I wanted to say this morning, I was sort of caught, a little hung up on the marathon metaphor. There's a lot about running a marathon that seems apt. There's a lot of planning, a lot of hard work, the long game, and you have to keep your eye on the horizon for a very long time. But the marathon metaphor runs out pretty quickly with this project because in essence, it is a solo endeavor. And this project could not possibly be less of a solo endeavor. So before I welcome some extraordinary people up here to the stage, I'd really love the opportunity to recognize the extraordinary people who have gotten us here from the internal workings of Lancaster history. And a lot of them are already standing up in the back, so it's going to be hard to ask them to stand. But I'd love for you all to meet the team from Lancaster history. So if you're on the staff, can you either please stand or wave, preferably wildly? Because if we move away from the solo sports metaphor to the team sports metaphor, this is the team you want on the field with you. These are incredibly dedicated, smart, talented people who show up every day and do incredible work, and I am incredibly grateful to be working alongside them, so I thank them for all of their effort and hard work. I also want to thank the members of our board of directors who were able to join us this morning. I see a number of you out there. This is our support team. They're the ones cheering us on and keeping us going from all directions. We're very fortunate to have the team working with us that we do. There are a couple of other parts of our team who aren't here today, but who are instrumental in having moved us to this point in the design work of the Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith Center. Centerbrook Architects has been working with us actually for about 17 years since they designed our last major project at Lancaster History. And the incredibly talented team at Ralph Applebaum Associates have been working tirelessly with us for these last 2 years on our exhibition design work. I cannot wait for you to see what they've put together when we open this center in about 18 months. But in order to get us to that point in 18 months, we do have one MVP for this next phase of our work, and that's the team at Benchmark Construction. Fortunately, you can always see Bobby Brandt back there. He stands out above the rest. We've worked with Benchmark now this is our third project, and we've been working with our team for the last couple of months, just stabilizing the site, making sure we're ready to roll, dealing with really sexy issues of moisture penetration and unstructurally safe walls. So for better or worse, our team, really led right now by Matt Oswald, Andrew Figelo, Mike Ventura, they have started reading our minds for better or worse, and they anticipate our every needs. And I'm grateful to have them alongside us in this journey. So since I say it to Bobby all the time, you guys are doing great work. Keep it up. Now it's my honor and privilege to invite our first two speakers to the stage, the chair of Lancaster's board and the former mayor of the city of Lancaster, the Honorable J. Richard Gray, along with the President and CEO of Lancaster History, Tom Ryan.
I'm like an old Harley. You got to replace parts from time to time. So I have a new knee, which frankly, I like the old one better. But just some short remarks. I'm chair of the board of Lancaster History and honored to be so. Think of the name of the facility that we're about to really begin the construction of. Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith Center for History and Democracy. The epitaph written by Thaddeus Stevens on his tombstone in what was at the time of his death Lancaster County Integrated Cemetery states as follows: I repose in this quiet and secluded spot, not for any natural preference for solitude, but finding other cemeteries limited as to race by charter rules, I have chosen this that I may illustrate in my death the principles which I advocated through a long life: equality of man before his creator. Prior to this museum, the monument at his grave was the most lasting memorial. Stevens was removed from history by those who could not accept the result of the Civil War. We, by this museum, now affirm not just two individuals, but the principles for which they stood and their special relevancy today. Public education, due process of law, an abolition of slavery, voting rights are all relevant today, and Thaddeus Stevens is one of the reasons they're in our Constitution. We now work to create a place where the principles which they advocated through their lives are represented and memorialized, not with some rooms with old furniture, but a center dedicated not only to what they were, but what they stood for. Few, if any, of the history of Pennsylvania has had as great an influence on our form of government, on our rights today, than Thaddeus Stevens. Lydia Smith set an example of what could be done by a confident African-American woman ahead of her times. The board has been excited to participate with the funders, the steering committee, the staff, all levels of government, and nationally acknowledged experts, illustrating and affirming the principles which Stevens and Smith advocated throughout their lives. We look forward to the museum becoming a reality, and thank you for your attendance here today. Thank you.
It is so gratifying to see such a turnout for this morning to launch the construction of this long-awaited project. I want to begin by thanking some very visionary people from this community who from the very beginning stepped up with unprecedented support for the project. Dale High and the High Foundation, we thank you. The Steinman Foundation, represented today by Bob Krasny, Shane Zimmerman, and Lauren Frick, we thank you. The Lancaster Cruise Authority, represented by Marshall Snively and Jeremy Young, we thank you. The Fulton Forward Foundation, represented by Smokey Glover. Our friends at the National Endowment for the Humanities, we thank you. And yet there are many people in this room who, if I chose to name you all, we would be here for a long time. And I mean major supporters and contributors. We've received 70 gifts from more than 150 contributors. Combined, you have taken us to a total of contributions of $15.75 million, or 66% of our campaign goal. We thank you. The Lancaster County Historical Society was founded in 1886, and over the years it's contributed much to our community. Yet I am certain that the Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith Center for History and Democracy will be the most important contribution Lancaster history has ever made to our county, to our Commonwealth, and to our country. For a century and a half, many Lancastrians have known the name Thaddeus Stevens and the name Lydia Hamilton Smith. But other than the African American community, few Lancastrians, or Americans for that matter, have chosen to honor that memory and preserve that legacy. This is all about to change. This center, with the help from scholars around the country, from residents within this community, will shed compelling light on Lancaster's role as a center point in the vast network we know as the Underground Railroad, which actively spanned from west in Carlisle to the east in Philadelphia, from points south through Baltimore to Lancaster to Rochester, all the way to Buxton, Canada. The Stevens and Smith Center will offer compelling testimony to the remarkable power that Stevens had, moving Lincoln and the nation toward emancipation. The extraordinary legislative skill which Stevens used to move the 13th and the 14th Amendments forward. The center will bear witness to Stevens' position as one of the most powerful political figures of the 19th century, especially through his chairmanship of the Committee on Ways and Means, for funding the war effort, for ensuring the right of black men to take up arms in support of the Union, and for championing radical Reconstruction after the war. This center will also take the often flattened, two-dimensional image that many have of Lydia Hamilton Smith and transform her, as she transformed herself, into a powerhouse woman who was Stevens' gatekeeper, as a mixed-race woman who used the court system to challenge the status quo, and who created real estate holdings in several states that left her a wealthy woman upon her death. At the Stevens and Smith Center, and here this morning, we also recognize the work of the Historic Preservation Trust and their many supporters, many who are in the room today. And we recognize the beautiful restoration of these buildings by Pete Egan and his team at Caldwell, Heckles, and Egan, done almost 20 years ago. We also express our gratitude to Pedro Rivera and the enthusiastic support of Stevens College as a partner in this endeavor, including having 3 of their student interns who will work side by side on this project with Benchmark. And I also thank Kevin Malloy and Sharon Nelson for the supportive relationship forged between Lancaster History and the Lancaster County Convention Center Authority. Finally, with another $4.2 million to go to reach our construction goal, and an additional $3.8 million to reach our sustainability endowment, I urge each of you who have not yet pledged your support, help complete the work begun by Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom and Rick. Before I introduce our next 2 speakers, I want to acknowledge our elected official who's joined us this morning, Representative Mike Sturla, who has walked alongside Lancaster History for years in ensuring a number of our projects were able to come to fruition. I think we also have in the audience the Honorable Judge Larry Stingle, who serves on our board as well. And I am now proud to introduce our next 2 speakers, the Mayor of the City of Lancaster, Deneen Sirachi, and Representative Izzy Smithway-Dell to give a few of their thoughts.
Good morning. So beginning in 2018, when Robin first shared with me a proposal to the NEA, I have been along on this journey, and I have been learning about the story, the life and legacy of Lydia Hamilton Smith and Thaddeus Stevens. And I'm reminded of the Shakespeare quote that what's past is prologue. And I can't help but think about that phrasing as we are situated here at the corner of Vine and Queen Streets. Thaddeus Stevens' ideas were deemed radical for a very long time and then became reality as the country's political landscape shifted. And it has me thinking about how progress happens today. His ideals around equality for all or access to public education are still being challenged. The division and dichotomy of political perspectives between President Buchanan and Congressman Stevens, who literally lived a mile apart, dined a couple of times together, somehow helps me make sense of the division that exists in our world today. Thaddeus Stevens held steadfast to what we know is right. And history is the ultimate judge, and Thaddeus Stevens, in my mind, is surely on the right side of history. And then there's Lydia Hamilton Smith. What an amazing woman who navigated a world that was set up for women like her to play a very specific and diminished role, almost invisible, in the society of that time. She shattered that expectation, becoming a successful businesswoman in her own right. It is an example that we can all continue to learn from, and I look forward to elevating Lydia Hamilton Smith in the same breath that we mentioned Thaddeus Stevens. There's so much conversation right now around democracy and our nation's values. The launch of the Stevens and Smith Center seems so especially relevant to the story that's unfolding before our eyes right now. I know the center will share a new perspective on Lancaster's past that I believe, I hope, will help us make sense of our present. That is something that I am very much looking forward to. I'm deeply grateful for the team at Lancaster History, for their vision for this center and their shared passion for the success of our city. And I know that there are many partners, some that have been mentioned and some that have not been mentioned, partners, funders, and other individuals who are making this center possible. And for making the center possible, it is making Lancaster and our history play out on a national stage at an incredibly important moment in our political future as a country. And I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So yesterday was Mother's Day. So congratulations to all the mothers in the room. Thank you so much for what you do. Let's give them a round of applause real quick. Thank you. And you're probably wondering where on earth I could possibly be going with that. So I'll tell you. My mother, the late Dr. Rita Smith Waddell, used to read this book to me, and it was about the Underground Railroad. It was called Follow the Drinking Gourd. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it or if you're familiar with the spiritual on which it was based, but it references the constellation which features the North Star, of course. And so when I think about the Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith Center for Democracy being right here in Lancaster, in Pennsylvania, indeed the birthplace of American independence, I'm really thrilled, y'all. It's actually really exciting to have this center here in Pennsylvania, in Lancaster, and in my legislative district, the 49th district, because it's a part of reclaiming our legacy as the North Star state. For decades, this was a place where slaves freeing northward, they would cross the southern border of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, often into Lancaster County, and felt a greater sense of freedom and relief. This is the place where Thaddeus Stevens would not have been able to do so without the steadfast support of Lydia Hamilton Smith, who I'll come back to in a second, made possible the Reconstruction Amendments, which, for what it's worth, make it possible for me to stand up here and give you this speech. And that is quite a legacy to feel and to be a part of. As Mayor Sirachi said, we are at a time when the values that Stevens stood for, regardless of political party or affiliation, are under threat. And we have an obligation, not just to ourselves, but to our history, our sense of pride as Lancastrians, to be a part of reclaiming those values. Public goods, public education, voting access for all the people, regardless of race, creed, color, or gender. And I want to take a moment then to acknowledge Smith and the incredible work that she did at a time when she was not able to cast a vote in elections for the government that would determine many of the facets of her life. And that, I think, is a shame, but it gives me a little hope. And the hope that it gives me is this. It lets me know that we are part of a long legacy, that Stevens and Smith foresaw. They forecasted an incredible legacy of civil rights, advancing voting rights and emancipation for Black people, for women, a legacy that we are still working to carry on today. And so my hope is that you will do three things. One, be sure when this center opens to patronize it. Think about the information that is here, the history that is being offered, and how you can live that legacy into your own life. Yeah, exactly. US 222 runs right here. Please and thank you. It's right out the front door, actually. Thing two, of course, is I want to acknowledge, because it's how these things happen. You mentioned that you were 4.8? Where are we? Okay, we're $4.8 million out. I'm sure at some point, like we're already working on it, but I'm sure at some point Mike and I are going to get hit up to be a part of that. Shout out Mike Sterlett. But if you have not yet opened your wallet, if you have not yet found a way to make a contribution to this center, I'm going to encourage you to do so. And please know that you're not just contributing to a historical monument or a museum or an archaeology exhibit. This will be a jewel in the crown of this community, letting us know, letting everyone know how this community did and will continue to advance the future of American democracy. And the third thing I'm going to ask you to do, just because as a favor to me, if you find yourself with some free time, go to the Library of Congress, anywhere you can get national digital newspaper archives, and look for the April 4th, 1865 edition of the Washington National Republican, where the headline reads, "Extra, Glorious Fall of Richmond Captured by the Black Troops." The United States colored troops were a crucial part of the war effort in the eastern part of the United States, and indeed, it was Black people who secured the capital of the Confederacy and led strongly to winning the Civil War. And so I want to make sure that we all read in black and white the role of African Americans in our own deliverance and salvation. Please and thank you.
Thank you both. It's hard to follow all of these amazing people. One of the things that we have started saying internally when we speak about the fundraising initiatives for this project is that this is a project for everyone. We would like everyone to feel that they have a place in this project, they have a role to play. And so while I will point out the beautiful $4 million ginormous check over here, thanks to the CRIS Authority, alongside a lovely ginormous check from the Fulton Forward Foundation, our giving range right now for this project is $4 million to $4. And the $4 was a very intentional gift given to us by a young woman who's a college student in York County, who on 4/4/24, on Thaddeus Stevens' birthday, and also another notable date, wanted to make sure she signaled to us that though she's not in a position to make a significant gift now, she is in this project and she is alongside us along the way. So if you, if you see yourself in that $4 to $4 million range, we would love to have your participation in this project, and there are plenty of ways for you to be in touch. While we continue talking about what you can do here in the present, I am delighted to introduce to the stage two friends of Lancaster History who are doing incredible work with their own teams right now in this community. So I'd like you to please welcome the president of the NAACP Lancaster branch, Blanding Watson, and the chair emeritus of High Industries and the chairman of the High Foundation, Dale High.
Greetings and good morning, everyone. I bring greetings from the national branch of the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People, which is the NAACP. I'm also vice president of the Pennsylvania State Conference of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People in the U.S. Thank you for Lancaster History for this invitation to speak at the celebration, the groundbreaking museum education center dedicated to the accomplishments and memories of Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith. This event is both celebration and a challenge. These two remarkable people dedicated lifelong efforts to fighting racial injustice by building socioeconomic and political power for Black people and all people, assuring that Black people and all people had opportunities and to make their living and building wealth, making sure the education opportunities were available to all. Today, these issues still face us: racial justice, economic opportunity, and quality education. For all remain strategic initiatives of the NAACP on the national, state, and local level. The NAACP's vision is to ensure a society in which all individuals have equal rights and there is no racial hatred or racial discrimination. All who share this vision are welcome as members. We see Thaddeus Stevens' commitment to building social and economic and political power for all people, especially in his support for the 14th Amendment. This amendment granted citizenship to those born naturalized in the county, including people who had been enslaved. The amendment continues to benefit all of us by protecting our right to due process and equal protection under the law. We see Lydia Hamilton Smith's commitment to gaining an economic opportunity. She purchased property including the home and office building of Thaddeus Stevens, which had been her home for many years. She developed a successful business in Washington, D.C. She amassed enough wealth to leave legacies including money for her own burial in St. Mary's Cemetery on Park Avenue near North Lime Street, and funds to care for Thaddeus Stevens' grave in the Shrine of Concord Cemetery in North Mulberry and West Chestnut Streets. At this time, for someone who was a woman, a single mother, and a mixed race, this was remarkable. Stevens and Smith worked hard for social, political, and education equity in their time. Their contributions were remembered and honored by Black people in Lancaster, even during the difficult times of Jim Crowism. In October 1918, those attending the first annual meeting of the Lancaster County Negroes Civic League conducted a pilgrimage from the courthouse to Thaddeus Stevens' grave. 5 years later, in 1923, several people who attended that pilgrimage helped to organize the Lancaster branch of the National Association for Advancement of Colored People and gain a charter from the NAACP National Board of Directors. They continued the tradition of honoring Stevens at his grave site by participating in a pilgrimage in his tomb in 1925. They were joined by Boy Scouts, the YMCA, the Lancaster County Historical Society. Also in 1925, James Hurdle, an officer of the Lancaster branch and a waiter by profession, prepared remarks about Thaddeus Stevens to read at a meeting at the NAACP Lancaster branch. His words are preserved in the NAACP papers in the Library of Congress. He wrote, in part, "I will endeavor to give a few extracts from the life of Stevens, known as the Great Commoner. He was elected to Congress in 1848. In 1850, he made his first great speech against slavery. He was elected again in Congress by the Republican Party, at once took up a fight for abolition. Stevens had in this inscription, carved in his tombstone, "I repose in this secluded spot not from any natural preference for solitude by finding other cemeteries, limited by charter rules as to race. I have chosen it that I might be enabled to illustrate in my death the principles which I have advocated through a long life." The quality of man before his creator, Stephen lies almost forgotten in Shriners Cemetery. He is to be remembered as a co-worker of Charles Sumner, William Lloyd Garrison, John Brown, and others at their time gave their very lives for freedom of the slaves. Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith did risk their very lives and their livelihoods. They supported people seeking their freedom on the Underground Railroad and advocate for equality. In this moment in our country, we must embrace their example. We must work tirelessly for equity, not only in politics and voting rights, economic opportunity, and education as they did, but also in healthcare and environmental justice issues. These are also strategic initiatives of the NAACP. In our time, we see political divisions that cause some people to hark back the time of the Civil War. We see deep anger and ill will. We also seek harmonious and peacefully community. We must remember, like Stevens and Smith, that if we want peace, we must work for justice. The Lancaster branch of the NAACP joins Lancaster History, the city of Lancaster, and the state of Pennsylvania, and everyone here to celebrate the groundbreaking of the Stevens and Smith Center for History and Democracy. It will stand as a constant reminder that the struggle for freedom and equality in this county is a long, strenuous journey. We must take up our part in this important work. Thank you, everyone.
We hear that Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith Center for History and Democracy. It sounds like a pretty hefty name, doesn't it? And indeed it is. In our time, the meaning of words such as freedom, justice, equality, civic engagement, patriotism, and democracy are being tested anew. So the name is extremely relevant, and yes, it's important today. For many years, so many years, the stories of Stevens and Smith with their deep ties to Lancaster languished. From time to time, I would visit other U.S. cities and was shown an impressive presentation of some native son or daughter of which they were so proud. Sometimes, however, while appreciating the story that was presented in such a forceful way, I thought it really lacked the impact of the story of our own U.S. Congressman Thaddeus Stevens and also Lydia Hamilton Smith's role prior and during the Civil War here. I, along with so many others then, have advocated for this story to be given the appreciation and the value it deserves. For the High Foundation to be part of helping to launch this project in support of Lancaster history is a personal delight to me. Kudos to all of you, beginning with Tom Ryan and Robin and so many others that you heard here this morning, who have banded together to create what I believe will be a place of not only local, but actually national interest. The fact that all of you are here this morning for this ceremony indicates your commitment and support for this project. I'm proud to be in your company, and I thank you for caring so deeply for our city, for our country, and for the values that have brought us to this point and will be so important as we move ahead into the future. I thank you all so much.
Thanks, Dale and Blanding. And now, last but decidedly not least, I'm pleased to invite to the stage one of our two co-chairs for the steering committee of the Capitol campaign. You probably all know Tom Baldridge from his many stage appearances at the Chamber Dinner. But please welcome Tom to deliver some rousing final remarks before we send you forth into some site tours.
Rousing, is it? Get ready, folks. As Robin said, my name is Tom Baldridge, and I am really honored to be the co-chair of the capital campaign for this project. And I share those duties as co-chair with a gentleman by the name of Lenwood Sloan, who is also on the board of Lancaster History and is an amazing human being that unfortunately couldn't be here today. I want to, though, make sure that we do not leave here today without acknowledging Lenwood's contribution to this project, which is principally well, it's a lot of things, but it's primarily this prioritizing one thing. When you leave here today and when in the future you speak of this project, and in fact when you write the check for this project, please make sure you refer to it as the Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith Center for History and Democracy. Lenwood's a champion of the role that Lydia Hamilton Smith played in Thaddeus Stevens' life, but also in her own life and her own legendary story. And we can all honor Lenwood by making sure that we never just refer to this as a Thaddeus Stevens, God forbid, museum, because that is not what this project is. I also want to thank, while I have the stage, Tom and Robin and the entire staff of Lancaster History for all they've done to bring us to this part. They are an extremely hardworking group, and we would not be here without their constant attention and presence to making sure that the ball keeps moving forward. And lastly, I also want to thank the other people that are on the campaign committee, hopefully well established and seated throughout the room so that you can quickly grab them on the way out and offer your support. But if those that are on the campaign committee would please raise their hand and wave and be thanked for what you're doing to help us out. Thank you very much. Bobby Kennedy once said, "Few men are willing to brave the disapproval of their fellows, the censure of their colleagues, the wrath of their society. Moral courage is a rarer commodity than bravery in the battle or of great intelligence. Yet, it is the one essential, vital quality for those who seek change, for those who seek to change the world, which yields most painfully to change." The lives of Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith embody those words as they demonstrated their own moral courage throughout their lives, and particularly at a time when our country needed it most. And while we talk a lot about Thaddeus Stevens and his legislative accomplishments, let us remember, in again acknowledging Lenwood Sloan, it is safe to say there is no Thaddeus Stevens without Lydia Hamilton Smith, and there is no Lydia Hamilton Smith story without Thaddeus Stevens. They are, in fact, linked, and it is imperative that we honor them both when we honor one. At this point, recognizing their moral courage, Lancaster is entrusted, and in fact obligated, to tell the stories so that others can learn. We in Lancaster County have a duty to put a spotlight on the worst time in our nation's history and celebrate the hope, the change, and the betterment that came from it. Much of it, now imagine this, much of it starting right here in that house in our town. Thanks in part to Lydia Hamilton Smith and Thaddeus Stevens, this country emerged from its darkest days with a new vision and hope for our collective future. Wherein the tenets of the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, people, are created equal, could finally begin to be realized. This house will tell that story. This Center for History and Democracy will teach those lessons. And this overall experience will celebrate the opportunity, hope, and optimism in our country's ongoing quest to create a more perfect union. Congressman Stevens and Mrs. Smith demonstrated that each of us can make a difference in our community and in our country. Please stand with them and with us and consider making a difference by supporting this campaign. As has been mentioned, we have a goal of $24 million, and we're currently at 16.75. 15.7. We can do it, folks. Let's get to 16 in this room this morning. 15.75 million. We have two goals for the campaign. One goal is to raise 24 million and to make this museum and Center for Democracy everything that it can be to showcase the world. The second goal, beyond the dollar amount, is the participation amount. Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith's lives would demonstrate that they do not want all the money to come from millionaires and billionaires that can afford to pay some money to create this tribute. Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton's lives suggest that they want those $4 givers in mass be a part of this effort so that everybody owns this project, not just the people that have the dollars to be able to contribute. We are hopeful that we can achieve both goals. We are hopeful that those can give significantly will please do so. We are equally hopeful that we can get many, many people through many, many walks of life and many, many areas of the country, quite frankly, to support this project for what it stands for and what it will mean to Lancaster County, and as significantly, what it will mean for this country. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you all writing checks.
Thanks, Tom. So the sun is out, which I think is a very auspicious sign for us today. Before I send you forth into your week on this Monday morning, there are just three things to wrap up. One, what happens next? So construction begins. There's no actual ground we have to break at this groundbreaking. So when we send you forth into a site tour where you can wander through the building, just appreciate the raw, unfinished nature of the site as it is now. You'll never have a chance to see this space like it is again today. It is as close as it really could be to the space that Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Smith once lived in and touched. Go caress the walls, go stand and commune in these spaces and recognize the significance of the history that they contain. We will commence the construction today. We will conclude the construction before the end of this year. So what takes us so long to not be open until probably next October? We have all of these beautiful, fantastic exhibition components that are going to be fabricated and installed to bring all of this content and these stories to life. That will happen in 2025, and we hope and look forward to welcoming you to a ribbon cutting next fall, hopefully sometime in October. So between now and then, we invite you to stay in touch with us. You've been seeing these slides behind us. They list our website, stevensandsmithcenter.org. We will be keeping up-to-date information alive and available there for you. We have materials in the back if you'd like to follow along with us and have something to take away. We really, really encourage you to be part of this project and to share the vision of this project with the people you know and care about. So please go forth from this morning's event feeling encouraged by what our community is committed to doing here. Play the role that you see fit to play. We invite each of you to be part of this. We thank you so much for being here today. And again, I invite you to go over to the Stevens and Smith Center now and walk around, see it as best you can. There are tripping hazards everywhere you could possibly find one. So look down before you make any concerted leaps. Our team will be scattered throughout the building to answer your questions. Thank you so much for being here today.